Let me take a few minutes today to share with you some practical ways to really go about fasting. It is a term we use. We've used it probably since our beginning. We've had multiple emphases on prayer and fasting, more in the last 10 years or so. But I also realize that with many new Christians in our body, some who are just a few years old, and a growing amount of people who are maturing their faith, fasting may not be as well known among our body as perhaps I think it may be. And there are various ways to fast, and perhaps people are wondering, what are some simple ways to start? So I want to take some time, if I could today, and just walk you through just in a few minutes some ways to get started fasting, to ways to understand the concept of fasting, see if I can bring some help in this area. You'll hear some of this as well on the first episode of the 21 Days of Prayer and Fasting podcast, which starts January 5th. But let me just give you a kind of a preview of what you'll hear there as well. First of all, know that fasting is a physical discipline that we implement into our life that has spiritual results. In other words, it's designed to remind us what we need more than even things to sustain us physically. And so we abstain from food to remind us that what we need even more than our physical survival or food is our spiritual food. We need Christ more than even what we need on this earth. And so it's a physical discipline. It's something we do externally that is designed to teach us something internally. It's a physical discipline that has spiritual results. Let me share with you one opinion I have on fasting. And I think folks can disagree here and we can get along fine. I don't think the Bible speaks of fasting in any other type of way than food. Now, some have fasted from technology. Some fast from other things that they really like, perhaps a hobby. I don't think that's sin. I don't see a huge biblical ground for that. The Bible seems to speak of various types of fasting, but they all involve food. And the point of that is that food is the basic element we need to survive. It's the physical necessity. And so when we abstain from that, in view of something more important, like our spiritual relationship with God, it is signaling to ourselves, and it's designed to be an offering to God to say we value Him more than even what we have to survive. And so understand, I personally hold to this opinion that fasting has to involve food. That's really what it's designed to do. Now, once we get to that point, I think we can have a lot of different ways to fast. For instance, maybe you'll fast one meal per day for a week. Maybe it's a breakfast or a lunch or a dinner. Perhaps you'll fast one day during a week. Maybe you'll choose to fast for 3 days in a month. Those 3 days could be in a row, consecutive. Those 3 days could be one day a week, let's say for a month, over a 4-week period. And so I think you're sensing here that really fasting has a lot of options. I tend to think they do need to all involve food. Sometimes there are seasons of life where we will fast from certain types of food. So perhaps you still eat your regular meals, but you abstain from a certain type of food. That is a form of fasting. There's one other thing about fasting that I think is important. There is, and you can use the term medical fasting, nutritional fasting, and it's simply fasting for reasons that are for your own benefit physically. I don't think that's the point of the Bible's fasting. So not only do I think that fasting probably needs to involve food, I think that instead of eating, what needs to happen in that moment is a greater awareness and attention to our spiritual needs. So that's why prayer and fasting go together. Now, do I think you need to go to your prayer closet and spend that time when you're eating in dedicated, silent, alone prayer? Not necessarily. It may be that you'll take a walk during that time and you'll commune with God. It may be that you'll skip a certain meal and you'll read your Bible. So there's various ways that you can give greater attention to your spiritual life instead of eating in that moment of fasting. But I would remind you that fasting isn't just going about your normal day and refusing to eat with no attention giving to your spiritual life. The point is to abstain from a physical necessity for a brief time to give greater attention to a spiritual necessity. So this can be an odd irony, can't it? That we are pursuing spiritual health by removing a physical necessity briefly, and yet we're to appear physically like we're not doing anything different. So I want to encourage you, even in a time in which we're promoting prayer and fasting, which feels a little odd at times because fasting is designed to be somewhat of a, can I use the phrase, secret discipline? Maybe not a real manifest discipline. We talk about it a lot. We're encouraging you to do it. But I want to remind you, we're not encouraging you to broadcast it, all right? It is something designed to be quite personal. I use the word secret there in the right way. And we're not to necessarily try to grandstand our fasting. And so in these 21 days, I would encourage you, find a way to remove food for a brief time, whether it be once a day, once a week, a few times a month. You can decide the schedule. And during that time, focus on the spiritual needs, which would be giving greater attention to prayer, to Bible reading, to meditating in God's presence, to worship. There's some freedom there as well. But while you do this, we're not to grandstand this or broadcast it. We're to go about our lives as if we are just normally operating. And what happens in that is God does give us a beautiful season of growth. He matures us, He deepens us, and we become more acutely aware of how much more important God is than even the necessity for survival physically, which is food.